everybody. My name is Katrina Walser, and if we haven't met before, I am a knitting teacher and designer based in Sydney, Australia. And welcome to episode 3 of my podcast on the needles. Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Alright, so it is October 2021, and let's just go over what's been happening over the month. So I think this is going to be a fairly long episode for various reasons, so let's just get into it. So the first section I have is on the needles, and this is an overview of what I have been knitting for the past month, both whips and FOs. And I think that it makes more sense actually to talk about FOs first, because then that way if you're watching these back to back, you can see the progression of stuff more easily from like what happened last month to what happened this month before going into new stuff. And also, I have been watching a lot of Edible Thoughts Makes, which is one of my favorite knitting podcasts. And Stephanie goes into a lot of detail about what she's actually making or what she's made. And I thought I might give that a shot because I actually really appreciate all the detail that she goes into. So let me know what you think when this is done. If it's just too much nitty gritty, then I can dial it back a little bit and just not go into quite as many details, because I can really go on about this stuff if you give me leave to. But if you like it, let me know as well, because that would be helpful for me for next time. And make sure you grab a drink or you're knitting or whatever. I'm going to try and stay hydrated. And we will just go from there. So, the first thing I finished off last month was my Carbeth jumper. So I finished it. Here she is. Ta-da! Alright, so I went back last night and watched last month's podcast episode, and it's pretty funny because I said that I had all these alterations that I had done, and if they didn't work out, then I would be going back and eating my words. And of course, what do you think I'm doing right now? So, last episode, I had gotten all the way up to the neckline being finished, and I had made some alterations to the pattern so that I did the sleeves last, because how this is meant to be constructed is that you cast on from the bottom, you work up here to the underarms, and then you cast on the sleeves at the cuff and also work all the way up to the underarms, and then you join all 3 pieces together and you knit the top decreases, and then you do the neck. And so I hadn't liked that idea because all that joining seemed painful, interesting. I don't know. I thought that I could get away with not doing it. So I was trying to construct it like a more typical raglan. And of course it didn't work out. I guess there are reasons the patterns are written the way that they are. And sometimes you can get away with altering them, and sometimes you probably just trust that the designer knows what they were talking about. So I had also made the body of the jumper too long for what I wanted. So the reason that I made this jumper in the first place is that I have a bunch of high-waisted skirts that I wanted to wear in the winter, and I just never have the chance to wear them because I didn't really have anything to wear them with. So I had wanted to make the body cropped enough that they would sit nicely with my skirts, and when I tried it on the first time, I had already gotten all the way up to the neckline, and it was just too long. They weren't sitting quite right. The skirts weren't sitting right underneath the jumper. So I frogged it all back because there were just too many things going wrong. So I ended up frogging it all the way back down to the underarms and I frogged back extra. So this underarm section, this section here used to be quite a bit longer. And so I frogged back the whole neck, all the decreases, and then maybe like 1.5 inches, which is what, 4-ish centimeters of the body part. And then I was good and I held the stitches like you're meant to, and then I cast on the arms and I joined it all in the round and then did it all in one piece up to the neck. Joining it all was as painful as I had imagined it would be. There were just interchangeable needle cables everywhere. And there was scrap yarn and there were just all sorts of things going on. But once I had done the join, it was fine, and then it was pretty much smooth sailing from there. The one mod that I did make, that I'm really glad that I did, is that what I actually did on the sleeves, I cast them on just after the ribbing. So I cast them on about here, and I did a provisional cast on. And so that way, when I was done, I could actually try the whole piece on and see how long I had made the arms. And then I just picked up the provisional cast on and I knit down this way towards the cuff. And I'm really glad that I did that because I made the sleeves way too short. So I think I am just going to do that for everything now when I do bottom up pieces, because I really just don't trust my measurements and my ability to figure out how long the body of a jumper should be or a sleeve should be. So I think I'm just going to cast on provisionally for the cuffs and the like bottom ribbing or bottom seam, whatever's happening in the jumper or shirt or whatever I'm making. Cast on provisionally, work my way up, and then try the thing on, and then pick up the provisional cast on stitches, and then either knit some extra length if I need to, or frog it back a little bit if it's too long, or just like bind it off if it's just right. So, oh yes, the details I was going to add. So this was 8-ply held double. So it was Bendigo Woolen Mills, 1 strand of luxury 8-ply in Ghost, I think it was, and 1 strand of tweed 8-ply in Natural. And the colour combo came out really nicely. It's just this really nice grey from far away, and then this subtle sort of marling close up, and the little tweed spots were quite nice. And I knit the main stockinette parts on a 6.5mm needle, and I think the ribbing was on a 6. And so yeah, luckily just after I bound off, we went through another cold snap here, so the weather has been jumping up and down, more than normal really. Usually what happens in Sydney is that it will be cold-ish up until maybe mid to late September, and then it starts warming up a bit faster. But this year, it's been bouncing up and down ridiculously. So we've had some days that were sort of 27, 28, and then some days that are like 13, and they'll be backed up against each other. So on those colder days, this has come in really handy, and I've had a good run actually wearing it. And I've really enjoyed wearing it with all the different skirts that I had that I wanted to have it for. So that's worked out really well. The second thing I wanted to show you is that I did make the funny beanie from the sleeve of my old jumper. So if you haven't seen last month's episode, basically what happened with this is that I was doing a design and I had to rip the entire sleeve off of the jumper because it just wasn't working. And it was a balloon sleeve. So the circumference of the bottom part was actually really, really wide. And so it ended up being so wide that I could actually use it as a beanie. So this was the original length. I didn't end up pulling any stitches out. And what I did was there were some live stitches up the top here, so I just picked them up. I guess they were right here because that's where the pattern ends. So where these like channels end, that's where I started the decreases. And I did want to decrease in pattern, but the way that I had frogged it just meant that it was going to be really hard to pick it up in such a way that you could like keep this sort of line of stitches going. So I ended up just doing a normal stockinette set of decreases. And this is actually inside out now. So when I was knitting it, it looked like this. So that's why I was saying that the crown is stockinette. But I decided that I like how it looks better this way around because it's so long that I wear it with a really thick brim. And I like that the brim part is the bit that looks like stockinette and the top bit is just the like reverse stockinette side. And this way it's not super overly matchy-matchy with the jumper. I do think that I made the bind off a little bit too tight, but it actually worked out pretty well because it means that it sits nicely. Sorry, this is gonna look ridiculous with my hair right now, but it means that it is like really snug because of the way it's folded up. The bind off actually sits about here, so it's sort of in the middle of the brim, and so it means it's nice and snug against my head. And I don't actually normally like fitted beanies. Normally I like them quite slouchy, but there's something about this one. I think it's the thickness and the fuzziness of it. It just feels like I don't know. I've been skiing once in my life. Feels like I'm gonna go skiing. Maybe I should go skiing. So yeah, this beanie, it's not helpful to go into many details because I'm not actually allowed to tell you what the yarn is. And if you want more of an explanation about that, go check episode 1. It's a bit of a long story. All right, the next piece I have is, okay, this is sort of funny. The thing about doing these podcasts monthly is that I actually knit relatively quickly, and it's probably not going to be super obvious based on how little, not how little, but how long running some of my projects will end up being. But sometimes I will start and finish an entire piece in the course of a month and have just an FO to show you without ever having shown you the whip. So this is my Gracefully shawl, and that's backwards. Here we go. So Gracefully is a pattern by my friend Jessica, who is Snickerdoodle Knits, and she did this as a collaboration with a yarn company who I think may be a local to her. Anyway, someone in the States. And they did it as like a mystery knit along, which sounded cool. But obviously that yarn would be hard to find here. So the yarn is from Dyeing to Knit, who is a new to me dyer, and she is based in Perth in Western Australia. And I found her through the Big Wool Show. And so this is on her Luscious sock base. And if I remember the colours correctly, this one is lilac, maybe lilac fields. And then this blue is birds of a feather. And the yellow is lemon drop. And the last colour is spring meadow. And I knit this on a 4mm needle and a 3.5mm needle, which is what it calls for in the pattern. You use different size needles for different sections of the shawl because the different textures need different size needles. And I really just love how textural it is. I don't know, there's something about it that just looks lovely. And these stitches are, like this one here, I'm not going to give it away because it's a paid for pattern, but this is like really simple. This stitch is really simple and just looks so cool. So I really like it. Now, the thing with this shawl is that, once again, I cannot leave well enough alone. So I cast on and okay, so the reason that I have so many long running projects that you'll end up seeing through the course of the podcast is that I do a lot of projects for patterns that I'm making, and they take a long time because you have to work things out as you go. And the other thing is that I usually try and have one work project, which is something I'm designing, and then one fun project that's just for me that is on the needles at any given time. But the thing with starting YouTube is that it's meant that even my fun projects, sometimes I feel the need to turn them into work. So, for example, if any of you saw my colorwork diary, the one where I made the cowl, the purple and pink one, like that was meant to be my fun project. But then I ended up having to stop at certain points so I could remember to record and just, you can't just pick it up and go for it because you have to set up your camera and stuff like that. So it makes it a really long process to be making a piece if you are recording. And so I'm sort of tempted to start getting to the point where either I only ever have one piece that I am, like where my work whip is a design or something that I'm filming, and not have those in parallel, or cast on a third thing that is truly just for me. So I don't know. I get stressed out when I have more than 2 whips at once. It's just how I am. So this one was fun because it really was just for me. And I wound up the yarn and I just went for it. I didn't even make a gauge swatch, and it was so liberating to just be able to start knitting and not have to care about recording it or taking photos or anything. So I need to remember to do that more often because I'm like losing the joy of knitting sometimes because it's just too much work. But part of the thing about not making a gauge swatch is that you end up using different yardage. So I was like, whatevs, it's a shawl. I don't mind if the gauge or the size is slightly different in the end. But it turns out that it meant that my yardage was quite different to what you're meant to essentially use in the pattern. So these were 50 gram skeins, which is what the pattern called for. But they just, I don't know. I think I'm just a fairly tight knitter. So at the end of the day, after I washed and blocked everything, it was meant to be 20 stitches to 10 centimeters, and I ended up with 22 stitches to 10 centimeters. So I think I'm naturally just a tighter knitter. And because of that, I got to the end of what was meant to be the first purple section, and it was just, there was so much yarn left over. And I really didn't want to have random ends of these 50 gram skeins around because I intentionally bought them to make this shawl. So I just kept going with the pattern. But because of that, I had added extra rows to this section, which meant that these, every section afterwards, I had to adjust the stitch counts and figure out how to adjust the different patterns to work with the new stitch counts. And it worked out fine. I don't mind doing maths. If I minded doing maths, I think I would have stopped designing a while ago. But yeah, so it just meant that I had to make adjustments at the start of every section. And for example, this bobble section here, so I ended up making smaller bobbles than what was recommended in the pattern because, I don't know, bobbles are fine. I don't love making them, and I also just don't really love how they look, especially really big ones. So I ended up doing smaller ones for this section. And they do look sort of cool. I think overall, in the piece, it looks good. I just wouldn't necessarily choose to make them myself most of the time. But because, for example, my gauge was so different and my bobbles were so much smaller, I got a whole extra bobble repeat out. You're only really meant to have 2 rows of bobbles in the pattern. So it ended up being a lot of extra stitches. There were so many stitches at the end. I think there were maybe 420 something stitches in the last row. So binding off was not for the faint of heart. But yeah, even after all that, this shawl is still, I think, something like 10 centimeters or 9 centimeters shorter than it's meant to be. If you look at the pattern, the depth of it was correct, but the width is about 9 or 10 centimeters too short. So just goes to show the gauge is important. This is why people tell you to swatch. And when you decide not to swatch, you do it at your own peril. And sometimes you have to do some maths to get the result that you want. But I was taking pretty meticulous notes on my stitch counts and how I actually did the mods to the pattern. So to get the extra rows out. So if you're curious, it's all in my Ravelry project for this shawl. So I will link to it down in the description box below. But yes, I just love these colours. Aren't they gorgeous? And it's so squishy. It's just really soft. It's a little bit too warm to wear this now because I think, fingers crossed, the weather has started just going up and up and won't be jumping around anymore. But we shall see. Hopefully I will get a couple more wears out of it before I have to put it away for the summer. Okay, so the last finished object I have is my bolero. I'm done, guys. So if you've been watching this from the start, I've had this as a very, very long running whip. I think I cast on in May. Oh yes, I remember, because I looked at the Ravelry project. It took me exactly 5 months. May, June, July, August, September, October, yes. So I cast on May 9th, and I finished on October 9th. And I wasn't working on it continuously through there. I knew that I wasn't going to be releasing the pattern until October, so I wasn't really in any rush to get it done. But I am really glad that I made it because this is actually the second sample of this bolero that I've made. The first one, it was either too short or too long. I don't remember. I think it was too long. And so the sleeves were just longer than I wanted them to be. It just the proportions weren't working out. So I went back to the drawing board a little bit and I regrouped with some of the feedback that my pattern testers had given me and I made some adjustments and stuff, and I'm really glad with how the final fit is. So compared to the original pattern, I think I made the whole thing a little bit shorter, like width-wise. And I also made the opening bit shorter as well, which makes the sleeves a little bit longer too, which is nice. And yeah, I just really like it. I just got back from taking photos of it for the pattern, which is why I'm a little bit more dressed up, and I will pop some of those on the screen. We have this nature reserve out the back of our house, which it's just this patch of bush, and I'm really glad it's there because it's meant that we could go for hikes and stuff during lockdown, which I will talk a bit more about later. And it's just really nice to be able to get out there. There's like a bit of a bushwalk and a creek and stuff, so it's been really nice. Okay, so this is the Travelling Bolero. It is made in Ren & Ollie sock yarn, which is a 4-ply or fingering weight. I think it's an 85-15. And the brown colour is Cinnabar and the grey colour is Wild Mushroom. And I think I knit the main section on a 4mm needle and the ribbing on a 375. But like I said, I am a relatively tight knitter. So if you do want to pick the pattern up when it's out, make sure you do a gauge swatch, because mosaic knitting, this is a style of knitting called mosaic knitting, it can be quite different to what you expect gauge-wise. So you have to experiment a little bit with your needles when you start out a new mosaic knitting project. And yes, the pattern's going to be out on October 9th, which is next Saturday. No, it's this Saturday. Oh my gosh, sorry, I've lost track of when I'm publishing this actual video. Yes, so it's this Saturday. So I'm really excited. And if you are on my mailing list, you should have already gotten a coupon code or like details of the pre-sale this morning. So make sure you check your inbox because you can grab the pattern now if you want. And yes, so I really love it. I'm going to wear this all summer. I have all sorts of plans for which outfits to wear with it. And I'll share a bit more of those with you next week. Oh, and I guess I should turn around. So this is what it looks like in the back, because this is the most interesting part. I don't know if this is a really awkward pose. If it is, I will just put one of the pictures that I took up on the screen instead. Okay, so whips. This is a really weird thing to say. I literally have nothing on my needles right now. Like, just nothing. It's a couple of different reasons. Most of the reasons are that I'm actually quite busy trying to finish this off before the pattern release. I've just got a bunch of work to do. Pattern releases take a lot of work in the run-up to them. And so I have 2 projects that I know I need to work on, that I know I want to work on. So the first one is the 4-way stock blanket. I will rewrite the pattern. Yes. So I am rewriting the pattern in an Australian yarn because the original pattern was written for the cotton from We Are Knitters, and I want to, I'm slowly doing a project to re-release all of my self-published patterns in yarns that you can buy in Australia. So I'm rewriting this pattern for Bendigo Wool and Mills 10-ply cotton. And I have my colours picked out. I actually shared them. I don't have it with me right now, but I shared the colours last video if you're interested. Sorry, not video, last podcast episode. And so I do need to cast that on, but I need to maybe do a gauge swatch first, just to make sure the dimensions end up being what I want them to be before I just knit this whole blanket. So that's going to take a little bit of work to set up. And also, the other project that I want to start on is the Entwine Beanie, which is a pattern that I was tech editing for my friend Astrid from Wattle and Wool. And she called for pattern testers, and after having tech edited it, I really wanted to make it. Because it's just super pretty. And I've never used mohair before, and it uses a strand of mohair and a strand of fingering weight yarn held together. And I thought it would be a really good opportunity to try making a project out of mohair finally, because everyone goes on about how great it is. But because of that, I thought it would be an interesting video to make like a video diary vlog style video about my first experiences using mohair, which means that I also have to, like I was saying, set up my camera and figure it out and actually like record as I knit it. And so because both the blanket and the hat beanie have some setup involved in casting on, and I'm so busy this week, I just haven't had the time or the energy to actually start a new project. And I'm okay with that, to be honest. I do feel a bit antsy sometimes when I'm sitting still and I don't have anything to knit, but I don't know that either of them have a really pressing deadline, because Astrid is on holiday right now, and Astrid, if you're watching this and there is actually a deadline, I'm really sorry, but I promise I am a quick knitter once I get started. So I'm pretty confident in my ability to just get it done whenever I need to. And the blanket doesn't really have a deadline either. So I'm okay with just waiting and chilling for a bit, getting all of the busy work of this week out of the way, and then starting on my new projects when I've got the headspace to do them. Okay, so that's all of my FOs and my non-existent whips. So the next section that we have is called Off the Needles, which is where I just chat about random things that are sometimes knitting related and sometimes not. Okay, so the first 2 things I have in this section are follow-ups from last month. So first off, the Big Wool Show was a lot of fun. It was just a really good weekend, actually. I had a lot more fun than I thought I would. So last year with the Big Wool Show, all I did was I made a set of videos, like I did a video workshop, and I wasn't really involved on the weekend itself because I don't remember what I was doing, but I just didn't sit down and watch the live stream. To be honest, it was probably because I was looking after my kid. she was a lot more high maintenance at the time than she is now. And not in any stroppy sort of way, just because she was a whole year younger. And at that age, she just had a lot more attention that she needed. But this year, I managed to set some time aside and actually watch the live stream, and they invited me onto the live stream, which was really fun. And okay, I shouldn't minimize my husband's input on this. He also looked after our small child for the whole day. So I was able to participate a little bit more. And yeah, it was really nice watching people talking about their lovely yarns and stuff and chatting on the live stream myself. And I met a bunch of new people, and I was just, there were 500 people watching the live stream, which was a little bit nerve-wracking when I hopped on camera. But it meant that I met a lot of new people, and people got in contact with me afterwards, and a couple of people booked some classes over Zoom. So it was just a really nice weekend. I had a really good time. So if you are here from the Big Wool Show and you've stuck around and kept watching me, thank you very much. And I'm really, really glad that you are here. And if you want to see some of the lovely yarn that I bought myself from the show, then I made a video about Australian indie dyers, a lot of which I found out through the show. So I will post a link to it. I think the cards are on this side, I think. Anyway, I'll post a link to it for you if you haven't seen that yet. The second thing that I wanted to follow up on from last month, is that I did release a new pattern. It's not the pattern that I thought. So, like I was saying last month, when you work with third-party publications, so essentially when you sell a pattern to someone for them to publish, it can be a little bit questionable about when things are going to be released. And especially because of COVID, people's publication schedules have just sort of gone out the window. So I get some amount of warning for when my pattern's going to be released, most of the time. Sometimes I find out that it's been released because I see it pop up in my Ravelry designer page. So last month, the Shayna Shrug, can't even speak, sorry. Last month, the Shayna Shrug came out, and it's a pattern that I did for I Like Knitting, which is an online magazine. And it is a big shrug cardigan that uses tiny little twist stitches, which are really cute. And so it's just this very subtle, easy texture. And it is written in a Rowan cotton cashmere, I think. And it was really important to me to use a yarn that Australians could get, because it's not an Australian publication, but I still wanted to make sure that Aussies could make it if they wanted to in the suggested yarn. And I Like Knitting were really good about making sure that I could use the yarn that I wanted to use, so that was really appreciated. And so I don't know who stocks this, but I do definitely know that you can get it from Morris & Sons. And even if you're not in Sydney and Melbourne, where they have physical stores, they do ship throughout the country. So if you do want to make the shrug, you can get the yarn for it here in Australia. So yeah, it's a really pretty cardigan. I'm excited to get the cardigan back because I want to wear it myself. So that is my pattern that was released. The one that I thought was going to be released, I'm pretty sure is coming out in a week or two. And I will tell you all about it next month instead. And if it doesn't come out, then I'll tell you about it the month after. And so the other thing that I wanted to talk about this month, which is not knitting related at all, but I figured that would be fine, is I wanted to talk a tiny little bit about what's been going on in Sydney in the last few months in terms of lockdown. So I've been trying not to harp on about this too much, because you just, if you think about it too much, you just cry a little bit inside. But, and like, I don't know, it's all that I'm talking about with my friends who are here and stuff, and even my friends who are overseas. So I didn't want to keep going on about it on the podcast as well. But essentially, I don't know what everyone's heard about in the news and stuff who's overseas, But Australia, the COVID situation was such that we managed to keep it out of the country, more or less. There would be outbreaks here and there, and Melbourne had a really long lockdown spell last year, so I don't want to minimise anything that they went through. But in general, at least in Sydney, we managed to keep COVID to a minimum. There were some restrictions around December and January this year because there was a bit of an outbreak around Christmas time last year. But since then, between like January to about June, there were no COVID cases at all in the state. And so life basically went back to like normal, like pre-pandemic normal, and it was really nice. And then with the Delta variant and everything, it managed to get back into the country, and it just started spreading a lot faster than the like state's health organization could keep on top of and like kick out in the same way as it had everything else and like the other outbreaks that we'd been having. So we went back into lockdown. It was like a staged lockdown, so restrictions kept getting tighter and tighter until it was fully just like locked down. And what that means here in Sydney at least is that you can't go more than 5 kilometres away from your house. Don't ask me what 5 kilometres is in miles because I have no idea. It's in Sydney terms, it's like 3 or 4 suburbs away from your house. All the shops are closed, except you can do click and collect or delivery. So you can order online and just go to the shop and pick it up outside the front door, or you can order stuff online, but that has meant that our postal system has gotten overwhelmed, so that's a whole other thing as well. Packages are taking forever to come these days. All the restaurants are shut, but you can do takeaway and delivery. I would really like to just sit in a cafe. That'd be nice. And you can't see anybody. And that's been the hardest bit. So, yeah, I think I'm more extroverted than I thought. I just, in the sort of classic sense, not classic, in the true sense of the words, where introverted means you get your energy from being by yourself and extroverted means that you get your energy from other people, I think I really have discovered how much of an extrovert I actually am. So it's been a tough couple of months, not gonna lie, but we are, at least in Sydney, starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. They have announced when restrictions are going to ease up and stuff like that. I can actually go sit in a cafe from next Monday, which will be nice. I can sit in a cafe with a maximum of 19 friends. The restrictions are really weird. Anyway, but what I thought I would do to try and just document this random sort of period of my life is I wanted to share with you a couple of things that I have discovered I am able to do for myself during lockdown because no one else was allowed to do them for me. So, quite a few of these are more or less beauty related. I discovered that I do have the ability to do my own eyebrows, which is something that I haven't done for about a decade probably. I don't even remember when I stopped doing it myself and started going to the salon for it. So that is a handy skill because it means I don't have to go into the shop even when I can. And then the other related thing is that I'm pretty sure I'm never going to get a manicure again. So I've always had an interest, a love for doing my nails. So I have a lot of the equipment that you need to do manicures anyway. Like I have all the cuticle stuff and like a really good nail file and things. And the last piece of the puzzle is that I recently discovered a company called Personail. So they make stickers. So this is called Rainbow Fish, which are really pretty. And so there was a brand of nail polish stickers that I used to get in the States, in Walmart actually. If anyone's curious and you are in the States, it's called In Coco. I think that they do sell online, but it was cheaper in Walmart. So every time we went to go visit my in-laws in North Carolina, I would just stock up on nail polish stickers in the Walmart there because there are no Walmarts in New York, at least not in the city. And so it took me a really long time to find a brand of nail polish stickers that I liked because different ones are different levels of quality. And so when I moved home, I figured that I just wasn't going to be able to find a brand that I liked because it was so difficult to find in the first place. But then I found it's personnel. I don't know who introduced them to me. I think it was my friend Shire. And they're just really good. I really love all their designs, and the stickers themselves are really easy to apply, and they last forever. Like a really long time. Yeah, so I'm really enjoying doing my own nails, and I may have bought too many stickers. And I don't think I'm ever going to go get a manicure done in a shop again. I also got a discount code from these guys. So if anyone is interested or curious to try them out for yourself, if anyone is curious to try them out for themselves or yourself, there is a link down below to the shop and the actual discount code. I think you get 10% off. The next thing that I've discovered I can do, which is something that I do not want to do again, is I gave Wes a haircut. His hair grows so quickly and it is so thick. And he had meant to get a haircut just like he was about to call the hairdresser, and then lockdown got announced. And I think he made it about 6 weeks and then it just got untenable. So at like 8:30 p.m. one night, he was like, "Oh, by the way, there's a hair clipper arriving tonight." And I was like, "How is it? It's 8:30." He was like, "I don't know. The shop said it would come sometime between 9 and 10 tonight." So this hair shaver thing just rocked up to our house, and I was pretty terrified. But he has a good friend who's a hairdresser who had told him what all the different settings needed to be on the hair clippers. And I think I did a pretty decent job. It looked different to how he normally looks, but it wasn't awful, especially after it had grown out a little bit. So that was a fun skill that I discovered that I have, but I do not want to do it again if it can be avoided. And I'm definitely not going to do my own hair. I really need a haircut, I want my fringe back, and I'm not doing my own hair because that's just a step too far. And the last thing is that we discovered how to make bubble tea. So Wes and I drink a lot of bubble tea. We drink so much bubble tea that there is a line item in our budgeting app, like a category for bubble tea, and I'm too scared to look at how much we actually spend on bubble tea every month. But getting bubble tea delivery on Uber Eats, it's doable, it's not recommended. Oh my gosh, it's so expensive. So through a bit of trial and error, Wes has figured out how to make bubble tea. He does most of it. I have learned how to make salty cheese foam, which don't knock it till you've tried it. I know it sounds really weird, but I started making cheese foam, and we have decided it's a sometimes thing, mostly because I can't make it consistently well. Sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's not great. So I need to tweak my recipe a little bit and figure out how to actually make it consistently good. One time I made it so salty, it was like basically inedible. But it was fun to try. It's fun to like tweak recipes. So yeah, thought it would be fun to just document some of the random things that I've learned during lockdown to try and put at least some positive spin on the whole situation. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. For my friends in Melbourne, I hope you're doing okay. I can't even imagine, but I hope you're all alright. And if you need anything, even just some moral support, let me know, because I am more than happy to be as much of a cheerleader or a shoulder to cry on as you need to be. The next section that we have is from the community, which is highlighting projects that people have made from my patterns. And so this month, I figured I'd show off some of the patterns that my lovely test knitters did for the Travelling Bolero. So, these are all the same pattern, so I don't need to go into too many details about that, but everyone used different yarn. So the pattern is actually written for Ren and Ollie sock yarn, as I mentioned, but you can substitute basically any 4-ply sock yarn if you need to, and it takes very little. I think I used a little less than half a skein of the grey colour and a little more than half a skein of the brown colour, because you have to do all the edging as well, for my size. And it is a flexibly sized pattern. So you get a spreadsheet with it, and it tells you what size, like you put in your measurements and it tells you exactly what size you need to make it to fit your body. So I'm in a bit of a smaller size. I discovered this from doing the pattern. I have a 13 and 3/4 inch shoulder, like shoulder to shoulder length, and I have about a 12.5 inch arm circumference. I don't know what those are in centimeters. For some reason, I always do body measurements in inches. And so, yeah, I tell you that just to let you know that that's the size that I made that took those amounts of yarn. But even in the larger sizes, I think it wouldn't take more than a skein of each color to make one of these. So it's a really good project for stash diving. So I figured I would share the projects that some of my testers had made and also the yarn that they used. So first up we have Lisa, who is 1121 Windmills on Instagram, and you should definitely go follow her if you aren't already, because she is starting her own little fiber related business, making lots of actual physical items. So fibers for spinning and stitch markers and project bags and stuff, and it's all really lovely. So you should go check out her account if you haven't yet. But she tested for me in this lovely orange and sort of neutral colour, and she ran out of yarn for the edging because she was actually stash diving, and so she ended up edging it in this like green colour that she grabbed from her stash, and it turned out really nicely actually. I think the contrast looks really cool. So that's also another idea. If you want to play around with the colours, feel free, go to town. I think it would look really cool with like a gradient yarn actually as the contrast colour. But anyway, so Lisa's project was made in black wattle 4-ply and a sock yarn from Skip Rope Yarn. And I don't think she told me what the contrast yarn was. But the black wattle I think is alpaca, which made things a little bit interesting for her because it made her blocking a little bit of a nightmare because the piece grew a lot after she wet blocked it. So she had to frog back some of the original piece that she made before she added the edging on. So yeah, just mosaic knitting can affect your gauge differently to how you expect. So make sure if you're ever doing a mosaic knitting project that you swatch pretty carefully if it's something that needs to fit you. Next up is Wendy, who is a Likely Lass on Instagram and I think probably also on Ravelry. And she did actually make hers from Ren and Ollie as well. I don't know what the colours were, but she made this very subtle greeny coloured shrug, and her contrast yarn and her main colour were quite similar, which gave a really cool effect. I think she did say that she would have liked to have made it in more contrast for next time. But I think as is, it looks really cool anyway. Yeah. And lastly is Amanetta, who I can't actually remember her Instagram handle. I think it's Amanetta Makes. I will pop it on the screen for you. And she made hers out of Ren and Ollie in Boysenberry, which is the like purpley pink colour, and I think she called it skein yarn. I'd have to look up the company because I'm not familiar with them. And yeah, hers, I really like the Boysenberry colour. Came out really nicely, and it is very contrasty, which looks really cool. And I think she said it's her daughter modelling in the photo, but the piece is actually for her mum, so I thought that was really sweet. So yes, thank you. I know that's not all of my testers, but for all of you, if any of you are watching, thank you so much for helping me test the pattern, because it's just been invaluable seeing people make it and hearing about your experiences with the pattern in the spreadsheet and stuff. And make sure that you'll go follow these guys because they are making some really lovely stuff. Okay, and then the last section we have is what is coming up next. So, like I mentioned, this month the big thing for me is the Travelling Bolero release, and if you would like to grab a copy of it, it will be out on Saturday. So keep an eye out on my Instagram. I am at Oliphant if you would like to see all of the news and the updates and things. And I am also going to release a video on how to make it next week. So that'll be next week's video. So I already have a bunch of tutorial videos up around all the techniques and stuff you need for the Bolero. And then next week there will be a full tutorial, like end to end, how you make the thing. So make sure you grab the pattern and then you can follow along with that next week. And the other thing for this month, aside from the next projects I'm planning on casting on that I mentioned earlier, is that I've realised that October 2021 is my 5th anniversary of being a pattern designer, which is really interesting. So I started designing back in 2016. I did publish a couple of free patterns on my blog in like June or July of 2016, but I published my first paid patterns in October. And yeah, I actually hadn't thought about that until the other week. And so I do want to do something to celebrate. I don't know what yet, but I will probably announce something in a week or two. So let me have a think about it, and I will make sure to definitely mention it in a video. And the best place to find like really up-to-date news with me is on Instagram. So if you want like immediate news about stuff, either check out Instagram or my mailing list. I'm trying to be better these days about actually updating my mailing list, because I do really appreciate everyone who has bothered to give me my email address. Give me their email addresses. And so I want to actually make that worth your time, having signed up. So I'll pop links. There are always links to my Instagram and my newsletter sign up down below. But if you just like watching YouTube videos, then I will definitely mention something to do with the anniversary in a video, because I think it's worth celebrating. 5 years is a really long time, and I have a lot of patterns now. I think it's easy to get caught up in the hustle of things, and you've got to stop and like take stock sometimes and realize how much you've actually done. So I will be doing that sometime later this month. And other than that, I think that's all I've got. Oof, how long have we been talking? Almost an hour. So thank you so much for watching, as always. I hope that you're doing well regardless of where in the world you are. So yeah, if you have enjoyed the last hour and change, or almost an hour that we've spent together at this point, then if you could hit the like button, that would be really helpful for me, because that helps other people find the podcast. Or just actually share it with some friends. If you have some knitting friends and you think that they would like this, then I would love for them to come watch, because it's always nice meeting new knitters. And if you haven't already subscribed, then feel free to subscribe down below. If you hit the little bell looking thing, it'll tell you when I post new videos. But I do post new videos every Thursday. And so I will see you next Thursday. And until then, happy knitting.